Welcome to ComSpark. We are here live in Cambridge, Massachusetts at MIT, attending the Chief Data Officer Quality Symposium, where the world leaders in data have all gathered. My name is Matthew DeRamo. I'll be your guest host. Joining me today is Christopher Boone, VP and Global Medical Epidemiology and Big Data Analysis Lead with Pfizer. Christopher, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking some time out of the symposium and joining us for some questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we got a handful put together, so I'd say let's kind of just jump right into it.
Let's go for it.
So what are your viewpoints on some of the biggest challenges with respect to a chief data officer?
I think that, it's interesting because I think most people assume that it's going to be technological or somehow related to a data-specific issue, but I really think the bigger, larger challenges are threefold. First thing is getting the proper leadership endorsement and leadership support in order to make a data strategy really happen. Quite frankly, we have a number of senior leaders who don't fully understand the ROI associated with the use of data and or a data strategy. So that presents challenges. I think the next key challenge is around having the cultural transformation, the change management that's associated with instituting data and becoming much more of a data-driven organization. There are a number of folks who are very skeptical of the use of data, or in some cases just resistant because they don't know what it means for them. And I think the last challenge that's rather significant is the funding challenge. Because you can't necessarily, we're still at somewhat nascent stages with defining what the clear ROI is for data. Subsequently it becomes difficult to then start to make those requests for increased budget to do many of the things that you want to do. So you're still, in many cases, relying on other groups and or the departments to really launch some of the key cool projects that you want to launch.
So would you say that some of the underlying pinnings to a solution for a lot of those problems is data literacy, right? Is that the organization at the leadership understands kind of what they're getting at, right?
Yep.
They can understand how they can monetize that data, but at the same time, from a cultural aspect, a lot of those folks can better understand how to ingest it, what they're looking at to really ultimately just bring it all the way up the chain.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the data literacy, I like to refer to it as organizational IQ, but generally there's such a limited understanding. There's extremes, right? There's either this extreme, well, there's really no use case for it, why am I doing this? Or there's the extreme case of they expect you to do everything and it's just impossible for a single group or person to really drive all of that change for an organization. So I think that managing the scope of the role of a CDO or head of data and analytics is critical for their success and for the success of the organization.
So, I mean, how much of that, the CDO role is new, right? So,
Right.
I mean, how much of that role is spent around educating leaders of an organization to help understand, the power of that data, that gold currency that they have in hand, versus managing, other professionals within the organization?
I would say 80% of the time is spent on evangelizing what the potential of data can do for an organization and the identification of use cases with other senior leaders in order to kind of give a proof of concept. I would tell people that right now, pretty much if you're in this head of data analytics or CDO type of role, you're either a first or second generation CDO or head. And so that evangelism is probably, if they're not spending majority of their time doing it, they're not doing it right. Because it's really around forming these kind of cross-functional collaborations. It's really around identifying opportunities where where you can figure out if data and analytics can drive the greatest impact and value for the organization. It's really around educating and bringing people along around the potential and the possibilities. So that requires having your own roadshow in order to make that happen. So yeah, a significant amount of my time is spent on education and meeting with others.
So a little bit about yourself. Where'd you get bit by the bug that drew you into all this? How'd you get hooked?
Yeah, I kind of have a pretty, I'll say, eclectic background. I have spent the majority of, all of my career in healthcare and life sciences. I started off in hospitals doing electronic health record systems, builds and installs and implementations. I then pivoted at a single point and got into the world of the secondary use of that data, which is more data and analytics, but it was more around using data to drive clinical research and more clinical quality improvement efforts that started at the American Heart Association. And really my passion has always been there. I think that from the point that I joined healthcare was always the single focus for me was always transformation for the benefit of the patient. So for me, there's a personal and professional interest in the work that I do. It's not just about the cool, gadgety, gimmicky perspectives that some may have, but for me, it's really around a personal interest in improving care for patients and driving change and transformation to meet the needs of populations that are underserved and underrepresented in many of these cases, and to really ensure that people like us and as well as others are getting the best care possible. And that's really what gets me up in the morning. That's what keeps me going.
That's really appreciative that you shared those thoughts, and appreciative that there's folks like you worrying about the overall care and feeding of the patient. So final question, I guess, tell me what your thoughts are with respect to what your vision to the data world will be in the future.
My future in my perspective is that data and analytics is so institutionalized that we don't need a separate group in order for it to exist. I think that, and I feel that same, I just think that everything should be data driven, and you shouldn't rely on a single isolated group in order to drive that level of insight into the organization. If we're doing this right, we all should be working ourselves out of a job, right? And we should be so ingrained into the business that every aspect, every part of the business is using data and analytics to do their work.
So less of a talking point, more of a normalcy kind of.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, again, Christopher, I greatly appreciate you spending some time talking with us, answering our questions. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks.
For more information on today's interview, please go ahead and visit ComSpark.tech.